I read 9 books in January, including 4 that I gave 5 stars. Let's go. Hey everyone, welcome to my January book roundup. I'm going to share with you short reviews and ratings for the 9 books that I read this month. As I read a wide variety of genres, I will group the reviews by genre, so that if you want to skip a certain genre or skip to a certain genre, you can do so. But make sure you skip to the end, because my book of the month may end up being my book of the year. And I can say that 100% without hyperbole. I was so enamored by this book. It was the first book I read this year, and it may be the very best book I read all year. But let's go ahead and jump in. Let's start with an audiobook I finished. Now, I don't normally read that many or listen to that many audiobooks, maybe 4 or 5 per year. I'm trying to do more of that this year. We'll see if it happens or not. I tend to listen to music a lot rather than listening to books. But I did finish one book in the science fiction genre, and that was Star Wars Episode 2, Attack of the Clones by R.A. Salvatore. I love these Star Wars audiobooks because you have soundtrack, you have special effects. Sometimes you have multiple voice narrators, although in the case of this book, it was just one narrator. And in these prequel novels, Lucasfilm or whoever hired them hired well-established authors. We got in Episode 1, Terry Brooks, and in Episode 2, we got R.A. Salvatore to write this book. And it's great because what these authors are able to do is additional scenes. They're able to flesh out the characters so much more than what we get on screen because you have more time in a book to do so. However, R.A. Salvatore had a really uphill battle with this one. Of the 11 Star Wars films, I think there are 11 at this point, Attack of the Clones is probably 10th or 11th ranked for me. But Salvatore did a better job, especially in fleshing out character. I felt that, in particular, the relationship between Anakin and Padme made a lot more sense in the book than it did on screen, maybe because there wasn't much chemistry between those two actors on screen, but I digress. But again, he couldn't overcome some of Lucas's just cringy dialogue. So Salvatore did an admirable job with this. I gave it a 2.5 out of 5, maybe a 3. I don't remember what I initially gave it, but somewhere around there. Salvatore's writing was fine. I thought the action sequences were great. I look forward to reading more of him. But as a whole, this book was not the best of the Star Wars books that I've read so far. Also up in the science fiction genre was the final book in this omnibus by Joe Haldeman. The final book in this omnibus was Forever Peace. Now, there are 3 books in this omnibus edition. There's The Forever War, Forever Free, and Forever Peace, which are in that order in the omnibus edition, even though Forever Peace was written before Forever Free. This is probably the best order to read it. The reason is Forever Free, although it was written third, is actually a direct sequel to The Forever War. While Forever Peace might be in the same Earth, it's really not 100% clear that it is even in the same kind of timeline or anything like that. But I enjoyed Forever Peace quite a bit. There was quite a bit of great character work here. It's a really quick read, and when the theme that came in, the Forever Peace, the solution that a lot of people have to have peace instead of war, was very thought-provoking. It was one of those reads, Haldeman just sucks you in and you just get to the end of the book so quickly because it's just such a compelling narrative. The Forever War is a top 10 work of science fiction for me. Forever Peace is probably not that high, but I did give it 5 out of 5. I will be reading more Joe Haldeman because I really enjoyed all 3 of these books. All right, let's go next into the world of literary fiction. One thing you may have noticed on my TBR videos, I'm having a guest pick a book for me each month with the prompt, pick a book that you think I'll love. And Joanna did just that. She picked Stoner by John Williams. This book has no right to be this good. Let me give you the elevator pitch. You know the elevator pitch, like super short. What's this about? This is about a unremarkable, undistinguished college professor, and it tells the story of his unremarkable and undistinguished life. That's what it's about. I fail to be able to express how good this is for such a slight premise. Because in many ways, this book has a lot of elements of literature that I don't like. For instance, I don't read a lot of mainstream fiction, set in modern day fiction that's about real life and relationships and things like that. I have zero interest in that kind of storytelling. I guess I'm someone who likes to escape into a book, and I don't want to be reminded of the mundanity of life. Although Stoner is not set in present time, it's kind of about the mundanity of life, about his life decisions and his relationships and his job and the relationships that he formed, good and bad, in his life. And it's a lot of things I don't like. In fact, halfway through this book, I was getting a little nervous, because when someone recommends a book to you and they want you to love it, you want to love it too, don't you? At least I do. And I wanted to love this book, of course, but I wasn't loving it about halfway through, because it was about that. But this is a book that just sneaks up on you, because as I got closer to the end, I just felt wholly invested in William Stoner's story and his life. I connected with him, even though he is a very unremarkable man. By the end of this book, about the last 30 pages, I just felt this emotional weight kind of sitting, this visceral weight on my chest as we got to the end of Stoner's story. And truly, only the best works of literature by the very best authors that I've read have been able to do that to me, which just reinforces that John Williams is a hell of a writer, to take something that by all accounts should not be a good book and make it a great one. This was fantastic. This is a 5 out of 5 by any stretch of the imagination, and I'd be shocked if it doesn't make my top 10 by the end of the year. So, Stoner by John Williams, 5 out of 5. All right, let's next go into the fantasy genre, starting with, I read the first volume of The History of Middle-earth by J.R.R. Tolkien and Christopher Tolkien. The first volume is The Book of Lost Tales, Part 1. I should have trusted Christopher Tolkien when in the prelude he said something like, "This is some of the most unremarkable works my father produced." Because it was a really tough read. It was a really dry read. I didn't enjoy most of it. I enjoyed the writing. I enjoyed the lore. There were times I enjoyed what he was doing, and there were times I enjoyed Christopher Tolkien talking about, just in the commentary, where he found these stories and how they changed and how they evolved. I do like that aspect of a lot of this unpublished works of J.R.R. Tolkien that, of course, were published. I did enjoy that quite a bit. Like in Beren and Luthien, I found that fascinating, how J.R.R. Tolkien continually changed the story. And it was interesting in here, but this is a really, really dry read. In fact, it's so dry, it caused me to change my trajectory. I was going to read all 12 of these History of Middle-earth this year, all 12 volumes, but I'm going to slow that down and just read 5 or 6 of them this year, because this was a pretty dry read. I gave The Book of Lost Tales Part 1 a 2.5 out of 5. I read on my Kindle this month a novella by an indie author named John Cronshaw, and the novella is called The Fool, and it wasn't what I expected. So John Cronshaw writes these kind of serialized, I would say more novellas than anything, where it's kind of about 100 pages and it's episodic and it leads to the next one. And this is the first of a series. I don't recall the name of it. I'll put it down here. And it tells the story of a princess who doesn't really want to be a princess. And I like the story as a whole. I didn't connect with Cronshaw's writing personally. You may connect with him as a writer, but the writing style wasn't for me. He's one of those authors that writes very short chapters, and often like a page or 3 pages. And that's not the kind of writing that I personally connect with. The story itself was good, probably not enough for me to continue with this series, but I do have a couple more novellas by Cronshaw that I may pick up that start different series to see if maybe the writing style is unique to this series and is different in another one, or if maybe one of the other series appeals to me a little bit more. But overall, I did enjoy The Fool. It's a really quick read. I gave The Fool by John Cronshaw a 3 out of 5. Up next, let's talk about Gardens of the Moon by Stephen Erickson, the first book of the Malazan Book of the Fallen. I won't talk long on this one because I already put a vlog together. It was my first time I did a vlog, and I'm going to do that for this entire series, where simply after just about every reading session, I'll just give my thoughts. And you can see in that video, at times I really liked the book, at times I was very frustrated by the book. I think overall, though, I did enjoy it, and I am excited to read the second book because I feel I have a much better idea of what to expect from Erikson as an author. And Dead House Gates, which is book 2, which I'll be reading in March, I believe is just kind of a new starting point because, as it's mentioned from elsewhere, the second book starts on a totally different continent in this world, I believe. So even though the events may be influencing what happened in the second book, it's almost like a starting point again. So I'm very excited for that aspect of it. So check out my vlog for Gardens of the Moon. Also, I think February 20th, we're going to have a discussion on Alex's channel about this book with Alex and Jordan and Ian and our special guest, which I don't think we've announced yet. So I'll let Alex announce that one. But we have a great Malazan veteran that's going to help us through this book. Although it seems like they understood it a lot more than me. But anyway, maybe that's just me. But I gave the first book of Malazan, Book of the Fallen, Gardens of the Moon, a 3.5 out of 5. Now, immediately after reading Gardens of the Moon, I read The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe by C.S. Lewis. And this was intentional. I wanted to read something very, very different. Now, when I did a tier list of all my fantasy series, I think I put this in the mid-tier. And I may have to revisit this because I found this delightful. This was just whimsical and enjoyable, a quick read, very lighthearted. I mean, the allegory is very obvious as an adult, but I don't think this is meant to be read as an adult, or at least targeted towards a more seasoned reader as an audience. But I really enjoyed it. I love the themes in it. I love the characters, and I just enjoyed being in Narnia. It's a pretty quick read. I will be reading these one per month, so you can look forward to me talking about Prince Caspian next month. But The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, I gave a 4 out of 5. All right, my last read of the month. Originally, I was going to read Magician by Raymond E. Feist, but that's a chunker, and I ran out of time, so I'm so glad that I inserted this smaller book, Legend by David Gemmell. My goodness. Let me just say, when I finished Legend by David Gemmell, it's not a hard name to say. How did I say his name wrong? When I read Legend by David Gemmell, I immediately went online and looked up everything Gemmell wrote, and I added it to my TBR spreadsheet, like 30 books, just on the strength of this book. I want to read everything this man's written. This was so good. First of all, it was the bit of heroic fantasy that I didn't realize I needed in my life. This is written, I think, in the 80s, and I don't know how I missed him when I was reading fantasy in the 80s, but man, did I miss a great author, and I'm so glad that I have discovered him because he was a priority author for me this year, and I will read more of him this year. But just a quick sell on Legend by David Gemmell. It's about Druss the Legend, and he's an old man at this point, and he's one of the greatest warriors that's ever been. And the Draenei Empire is being invaded, and they call Druss for maybe one last stand to try to repel the invaders. And it's one of those where Druss goes, and he's pretty sure that he's going to die, but he's going to go down fighting. And I just love thematically, there's so many times in this book where there's just these heroic speeches. And it harkened back to like some of the movies I love, like William Wallace and Braveheart, the speech at the battle that Mel Gibson gives in the book. There's like one of these in there. Bill Pullman in Independence Day is another great one as well. I just love the heroic nature of this. But additionally, there's a lot of other characters in here that I felt were very three-dimensional. There are some aspects of this that felt like it was written in the 1980s, like one of the big relationships in there is kind of roll your eyes type of fare. But overall, I read this in 2 days, and this was fantastic. This is another book this will probably be a top 10 book. This has been a great month for the top of the books that I've read this month, at least. Legend by David Gemmell, 5 out of 5. Go read it if you haven't read it. So on to my book of the month. What could possibly top Legend, Stoner, Forever Peace, my other 3 5-star reads of the year? And I said at the beginning, this might be my best book I read this year. Lonesome Dove, Larry McMurtry. My goodness, this is amazing. This is an 850-page book that flew by. I don't say perfectly plotted very often, but this is a perfectly plotted book. It was not slow at any point. It's kind of a 3-act storyline, and each act you get some more characters thrown in there. I loved how a lot of the storylines weave together. I didn't initially love McMurtry's prose, which is it's kind of a combination of an omniscient third person or just a rapidly changing third person point of view. That's not my style, but when it's done well, it's done well, and he does it perfectly here. Above all, though, I love these characters, and I love the story, what they were doing. I don't remember who I was talking to. I was talking with someone on a live stream, and I mentioned that in the fantasy genre, my two favorite tropes are the fellowship trope and the quest trope. And although this is a Western, it's a fellowship and a quest. It's my two favorite things. It's just in a different setting, and it's done so, so well. There are surprises along the way. There are some character arcs that are just some of the best done I've read anywhere. I can see why Stephen King, Joe Abercrombie, and a fleet of other authors feel that this influenced them so much, enough that they call it their favorite, if not one of their favorite books ever. Lonesome Dove is magnificent. If you're not afraid of a big book, go pick it up. Even if you're not a fan of a Western, I think the deeper themes of this, the fellowship, the found family, the quest, the characterization, I think you'll really enjoy it. Lonesome Dove by Larry McMurtry, 5 out of 5, my book of the month. Strong candidate. I know it's only January, but strong candidate for my book of the year in 2023. Well, hey, that was my January. If you've read any of these 9 books, I'd love to talk with you in the comments section below. That's my favorite thing about making these videos. Also, let me know, what was your book of the month in January? Maybe I'll add it to my ever-growing TBR. If you like this video, please like and subscribe. Also, you can find me on Twitter and Goodreads. I'd love to interact with you there. As always, thank you for watching. Until next time, goodbye.